All right, this is the first inaugural episode of Have You Heard? My name is Matthew Soares. I'm alongside Ryan Doherty here. And Ryan, do you want to tell everyone, kind of just provide a little context about the show, what we're going to be talking about today and going forward?
Yes, excited to be here and discussing my favorite natural resource. And as you can see, our name is using the homonym of the word hurd, as hurd is the inner woody core of the hemp plant. And it's also when you hear something, and as we're going to be talking a lot about hemp, that's where the name "Have You Heard" comes from. It's have you heard about this new industrial material that's returning to America. And today we're going to be talking about why hemp and why we're interested and why there's such a movement surrounding this incredible, versatile natural material.
Yes, absolutely. So do you want to, go into a little detail about your background and how you got introduced to the plant and why you love it so much?
Yeah, like Matthew said, my name is Ryan Doherty. I'm the CEO of a company called Hemp Ventures and also on the board of the U.S. Hemp Building Association. And I'm involved with organizations like the Hemp Industries Association, the Fiber Herd Council, and some ASTM groups working on standards, as this is a brand new material. That's kind of the most exciting thing to me as an entrepreneur seeking out exciting new industries and technologies. This is kind of like if we just found something in the forest that produced everything you can make from petrochemicals, cotton, and timber, and it just got put on the market today. Happens to be that we live in kind of a fixed game here in our current market and day and age, and that's really what happened. The United States government and many governments around the world are following to bring back what was once the most versatile and iconic natural resource around the world, the largest cash crop for 40,000 years, and kind of just disappeared from our country and from a lot of the production around the world in the early 1900s. So that's the business opportunity is potentially tremendous to have your early engagement in building supply chains in this space that's obviously going to become quite large. But outside of that, the cannabis plant altogether is quite iconic and has a reputation all its own with its incredible versatility. And at a young age, I was definitely introduced to a different side of the cannabis plant, and had a university tour. I got to go to the University of Portland, University of Colorado at Boulder, and ended up graduating from James Madison University doing, at that point, research in industrial hemp. But before that, people say that sometimes in college they experiment with things like cannabis. Me and my friends did full-scale research and had a lot of resources to do that, and looked into extraction far before CBD extraction was large scale for commercial legal production, and had experiences getting to see fiber processing in parts of the country or parts of the world before there was high level of research here looking at it in the United States. And so I've been really lucky with my timing. And on top of all that, I grew up in Northern Virginia, down the street from some legendary homes like Monticello and Mount Vernon, and places where Washington and Jefferson lived and farmed and processed hemp with machines like this, where they have a long history of colonial supply chains of hemp production. And so in many parts of the country, people aren't really familiar. They don't have a history locally of hemp cultivation and production, but there in Virginia, the Virginia House of Burgesses, longest standing government body in North America, required their citizens to grow hemp to match their acreage of food production because they needed the material to build resources like canvas and rigging and oakum for their sailing ships to bring resources back from their developing colonies. And so hemp has played an integral role. Looking back further in history, there's tons of cultures. So there's just an enamoring interest. And whenever the government takes something away or makes it elusive, it only drives that interest, especially from American citizens. So I'm victim of the catching the hemp bug and wondering what we can do with this once it's fully unlocked to its true American potential here in our modern industrial world. So that's mine. And yourself, Matthew, you have a long history with hemp as well.
Yeah, I'll go into that in a second. I have a quick question for you though. Growing up in Northern Virginia, like in elementary school and middle school and stuff, were you guys going to like field trips to Monticello and Mount Vernon and like learning about the history of hemp at a young age?
Sir, yeah, like if you grow up in California, you learn about 1849 gold rush. If you grow up in other parts of the country, Northeast, you learn about the Mayflower, and it's kind of your 5th and 6th grade. And there we go to Williamsburg, which is where they landed, Jamestown, Williamsburg. That's the like historical capital, especially being up on the Potomac where I grew up. That is, you go to Monticello. I got to go to Monticello with school, and they have so much engineering history. Thomas Jefferson patented and released the patent for the first steam-powered hemp brake because he thought it was hemp processing was so important to the young colony. And there's tons of just hemp history, but they definitely back in the day in Williamsburg, they actually not even the hemp stone, they had the hemp brake, they had a thing called a hemp stone, and they'd actually lay hemp and flax and other natural fibers in a circle, and they'd roll a stone over to crush them. And people nowadays find hemp stones in their gardens or in their old piles of rubble and stuff from their previous ancestors processing hemp in that fashion. But yeah, that is we do very lucky.
I'm jealous. Yeah.
Virginia and Kentucky is the historical capital of American hemp production. Soon to have hemp museums and bring it back.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts, so we were going to like Plymouth Rock and Plymouth Plantation, and they weren't really talking about the hemp side of things from a young age. But yeah, I mean, I had a similar introduction to the plant, kind of just messing around, and at a young age started consuming cannabis and started to just do research about like, all right, why is this thing illegal? Like it, people can drink alcohol, got curious and just started doing some research. And in high school, I was writing, they say in English class, they're like, hey, you got to write a research paper for the end of the year and you can pick anything you want. So I was like, all right, I could pick anything I want. So junior, senior year, I'm writing my research papers on the benefits of industrial hemp and using references like Popular Mechanics article right before, or actually it was right after the Marijuana Tax Act, and going into Jack Harris' Emperor's Wears No Clothes and just learning about all those different things. And it's funny because the more you learn about it, the more curious you become about, okay, what actually happened here. And I think you alluded to it in the beginning where it's like, we don't really know exactly what happened. There's kind of a lot of different angles that you can take. But yeah, just learning about, more sustainable building materials and food sources and carbon sequestration and all these different things. And the government taking it away, the government banning it, like that typically never really works with certain things. I mean, you can look to alcohol. But yeah, so then went to college, studied business management, continued to, consume recreationally, but never really had any ideas for starting a business. And so this is before 2018 with the 2018 Farm Bill. But once that passed, I graduated college, was working in some sales job, wasn't super fulfilled at the job I was at, wanted to work in the cannabis industry. And so I started working at a cannabis packaging company, worked there for like 4 years, just left about a little less than a year ago. But during that time, I was able to immerse myself more in the industry and use my job at a cannabis packaging company for like servicing the medical and adult use side of things as a vehicle to attend and learn more about industrial hemp events and things like that. So I traveled, around New England and for the most part, just New England, but going to different hemp events and continuing to learn about it. Started messing around with hempcrete in like 2018 as well, just at home, just trying to make some mixes. Never really got a good mix back then, but partook in a workshop up in Vermont, which was the first hempcrete home or hemp lime home in Vermont. So we actually got to work with the material and learn from a Canadian builder who'd been working with it for a long time. And from there, throughout all that time, I was trying to find hemp clothing, just incorporating hemp into pretty much every aspect of my life. And when it came to hemp clothing. I wasn't really able to find many options that, especially not that were made in the United States. And even now there's like less than like 5 companies that are manufacturing clothing made out of hemp in the United States. So I said, you know what, I can do that. I can make this happen. I'm from South Coast, Massachusetts, very rich history of textile manufacturing. So I worked with some people in Fall River, Mass. We designed a shirt. I'm actually wearing it right now. Name of the company is Yesterday. So we founded, me and a partner of mine founded this company, manufacturing clothing here in the United States, importing hemp fabric because it's still very difficult. There's really no hemp fabric that's made in the United States in terms of spinning or weaving the textiles. But a ton of benefits of hemp fabric that I won't go into right now. But so yeah, we're doing that now, making hemp clothing in the United States, starting with just t-shirts, starting small. We're going to continue to go down that path and make as many different products as we can. And been making content. That's how you and I originally were introduced to each other, just from some content a little over a year ago that I was just putting online, and you reached out and just got connected that way. So podcasts, random videos on TikTok, even though TikTok hates cannabis. So got my account temporarily banned once or twice on TikTok. But yeah, just interested in spreading education and helping to catalyze the industrial side specifically of the hemp plant. So it's a little bit about kind of what drives me and what makes me interested in this industry in general.
Well, it's the most diverse industry. I think, there's multiple industries within cannabis as a whole. It's not like another resource where there's only one or two things you can do with it. And we'll go more into that here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to transition, I'll throw it over to you in terms of just like, we've already touched on it a little bit, but why is hemp so important? Why is it important that we bring this plant back? And because everyone obviously is familiar with cannabis. When you say cannabis, people think marijuana, smoking it, what's medical and recreationally legal in most of the country now. But we're mostly going to focus on the industrial side of things. So when we say industrial hemp, what does that mean? And what are some of the outputs that we can get from this industrial side of the cannabis plant?
Absolutely. And the biggest clarification to make on what separates the cannabis industry, there's a big, huge overarching umbrella. And I'd say it's like, 20%, well, near future, it'll be like a smaller percentage of the above 0.3% stuff. And as far as acreage wise and such, but the big umbrella is below 0.3% THC and above 0.3% THC is the separator. That's what industrial hemp, the cannabinoid production of CBD, the floral production that produces those cannabinoids, and the grain production for the seed and the fiber is in that under 0.3. There's no plant count. Once you get a license, you can plant fields like that. And then the highly regulated, high THC, psychotropic or psychoactive products that are produced from the high recreational medical higher THC variety of cannabis is in that, there's a huge industry for it, much more mature right now, especially in the United States. But as far as what we forecast the size of what they could look like, see the industrial side of that below 0.3% THC, those grain and fiber and higher variety of cannabinoid products having a huge market access. But that is where the kind of separation is at the high level is the 0.3%. So the amount of tetrahydrocannabinol that's in the plant is where the initial separation is of the industries. And then once you get, and what we're talking about on this podcast is industrial hemp. So still including cannabinoids, but you're producing cannabinoids in a plant with no THC or very little. And so it has other effects. But that's looking at hemp, industrial hemp. There really is 3 industries and types of cultivation and processing methods and supply chains within hemp. You have your fiber, which is the original, the one that was probably most cultivated a long time ago historically, just because of its ease of processing and its ease of use of the materials that come from it. And then you have your grain, which is your seed that is used again for lots of other applications, but again it's grown in a unique method typically, and it's harvested and you have to treat seeds much differently than you do the stalk. And the other way that's kind of the most known here in the United States, because we have a very mature medical cannabis industry before CBD came to the scene, or other varieties of cannabinoids. But that's you're producing a flower, and typically either that flower is consumed as a smokable, but in most cases it's being extracted. You're not using that flower material, and that's you're just taking the cannabinoids out of the flower, and then you're putting them into a tincture or an edible or a salve or something like that. That's being used to distribute that cannabinoid into you. But that's kind of the big three: is the cannabinoid and floral, the grain, seed, and the fiber, hurd, or the tall fibrous variety. And there are ways to get them from the same harvest or the same variety of the same plant when grown. But typically these methods, when you're targeting one specific trait, like high fiber and hurd content, or high seed content, grain, yield, or high biomass of cannabinoids and flower, you typically, when you target multiple things, you're going to lose a little bit of each. And if you go after one thing specifically, you're kind of find higher traits and qualities of what you're seeking, just like any other, plant that you're growing and targeting a certain trait. But when you do grow for two things, the most typical around the world being grain and fiber. So you have seeds, hemp seeds on the top of a stalk, and you're going to collect the seeds and use those for, grain seed applications. And then you have the stalk and use that for fiber and hurd applications. But you can also do a dual crop of a floral material and a stalk, or even they try doing tri-cropping, or some people say quad cropping if they're going to use the roots or the leaves too, and using all the different methods. But and there's no one knows, not that someone's going to find out. There's different ways to grow it for different purposes, for different outcomes. But that's kind of, you do not typically get floral material, grain, and fiber of all high qualities or highest qualities from the same variety. And most people cultivating are typically targeting one of the specific traits that is beneficial. So that's kind of high level of where the ultimate dream variety that will continue to probably be illegal forever would be, and this is just in my opinion, but for highest bang for the buck for the farmer, obviously not for my personal interest, but to produce a high THC cannabis with a fiber, that would be, the ultimate. But that is obviously will remain elusive, as you can't grow like that.
Remain elusive because of the government, not because of the biology of a plant. Because farmers are having a hell of a time growing crops that are less than that 0.3% THC. And that's there's people that are saying that's a very arbitrary number. It goes back to, I don't know, it's like 100-year-old research that points, or something like that points to that 0.3% THC. And now we're seeing all this Delta 10 and Delta 8 and HHC, all these minor cannabinoids that people are pulling from industrial hemp. There's a lot of holes in the Farm Bill of 2018 that we're not going to talk about in this episode, but we could talk a long time about just all the holes of the 2018 Farm Bill. But yeah, I think you summarized it well, the differences between kind of like the medical recreational side of cannabis and what we're talking about here on this podcast, the industrial side. And visually, if you look at a farm of industrial hemp, it looks similar to how corn is grown. It's very densely packed. We want straight shoots going up. Whereas if you're growing for floral production on medical and recreational side of cannabis, you want each plant to look like a big bush. Essentially, you give the plant a lot of space. You do not want just one shoot going up. You want a lot of tops on the plant to create more flower sites, basically. So those are the differences there, and there's some crossover. There's a lot to be hashed out still with how these things are regulated. So we hope that this podcast kind of provides information and can, maybe eventually get some political people in the government on and to talk about these things. And because there's a lot going on even on the industrial hemp side of things with grain and animal feed and stuff like that. So cool. So that's the main outputs there. And I know you have a lot of samples of some different things that we can make out of hemp. So let's see some of these things that are being made currently or have been prototyped, or maybe even some things from the past, all made out of hemp. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, so I'll start one with the first going into that cannabinoid market. There is obviously CBD and then lots of the minor cannabinoids, things you're mentioning that they're deriving through chemical processes, and then other cannabinoids like CBN and CBG. And there's lots of innovation being done on that side, continuing to develop more varieties that are more potent in certain aspects or provide different benefits. So that's certainly a field that I'm not as familiar in, that we'll have individuals that are experts in that topic coming on and talking about. But that's something cool that you can do with that plant is with the waste material. They're figuring out things through that extraction process that they can, at the scale that they're at nowadays, pull out and maybe derive resins from the waste materials, or use cannabinoids overproduction to make other stuff, glues, or other potentially industrial products. The only thing with that kind of production is it's usually not scaled for ultimate yield as far as huge fields. You're targeting higher cannabinoid concentration in the flower and stuff. But that is they're figuring out other stuff to do maybe with some of that material that isn't making it to market and stuff like that. So there's innovation on that side to be had. And then another the other vertical would be the grain. And hemp seeds are just like many other small grain seeds. They've got a outer coating around the inner endosperm, and they have that coating is called a hull, and the inner core we've named it the heart, and that's what most hemp seed products are made from is the heart. Sometimes they do roast a whole seed, and you get a little more like fiber content and stuff. I'm not sure how much hull you want to consume on a regular basis, but that is both of these. As far as being not only a food use, an application, one of the biggest uses historically of hemp seeds was for industrial uses. They used it for lubrication, the hemp seed oil in large scale machinery for lubricating, and they've used it for dyes and stains for many different types of materials, and they use it for one of the biggest uses was as a base for paints. So they used to, like Sherwin-Williams, they have letters, back in the 30s, some of the biggest proponents fighting against the prohibition of hemp, or the, making it tougher to produce. And so that was pretty big, definitely back in the early colonial times, they would be using these types of product, seeds for more small scale production, but using it as an industrial oil. But nowadays, obviously the hemp heart is consumed either by itself, but tons of innovation there. People making things like tofu and cheese and things out of the hemp heart or the whole hemp seed, very similar to other products like soy. But hemp has a incredible seed like nutrient density. It's got lots of very healthy omegas, and there's people in the grain space, particularly guys like Chad Rosen from Victory Hemp, that could tell you a lot about why this seed is excellent for not only yourself but for other animals, cattle, chickens, and hopefully we will get someone like that to come on and describe that in great detail. But what I am most familiar with, and what most of my samples are showing, is the uses of this amazing material. And we kind of touched on it, why hemp is so cool, besides from its really cool cousin and the rest of its family. The hemp fiber, the original, probably wild type of hemp that has a long, straight, slender stalk, is used for actually its biomass, for what it's made out of. So you're not extracting typically, you can do processes to break it down into its core components and use those and stuff, but you're actually using the biomass it's creating. And like many other plants like flax or canaf or something like that, your hope is to get as much biomass as you can from the field in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of resources going into the field. And that's really where hemp competes. When you break down a plant or a tree or anything else, they're often made up of very similar things. The raw material of the actual core of the tree or the bark and stuff like that, cellulose and natural glues like lignins, and it's got natural sugars in there like xylitol, and it's a combination of those things. Just like we're 75% water, the tree or the plants are made up of very similar components. So it's not like hemp stalks have a new chemical in them or a new, they're made out of very similar things to a tree. So there's not like new science that we're breaking through, to my knowledge at the very moment, to make absolutely new novel plastics out of hemp or resins out of the hemp stalk. But the really interesting and cool and maybe dangerous thing about hemp is that you can grow it just about anywhere and with very limited resources. And when I say limited resources, like you don't need tons of pesticides and herbicides and treatments and special types of farming methods to produce it, because it's very competitive. They used to call it the frontier fiber, and they would use it to actually clear land in very hard to farm areas because it creates a very heavy carpet of 2 to 4 inch starter plants with a heavy coverage, and it chokes out other plants. And as it does that, it continues to compete with itself and with the plants around it. And oftentimes it becomes a weed because it is so competitive that it will remain in areas, giving it names like ditchweed and stuff like that, where it's continued to volunteer, self-propagate itself for years to follow. But this is what makes hemp so interesting, is that it can grow incredibly fast, producing tons, literal metric tons of material in a much shorter amount of time than many other natural resources. And so it kind of lends itself to being hard to control as far as being a resource, because you can take 10 acres of hemp and produce seed with it, and then that next year grow 10x of that, and so on and so forth. And if you were an unchecked, unregulated, small colony with endless ambition and drive, you might just set your colonizer off with your interest in producing hemp in regions they had not yet approved yet and such. And that's where some interesting, stories or speculation come on the real, or the other reasons we don't have large scale hemp production currently in the world, is because it is something that's difficult to kind of maintain the market of, or it disrupts other markets, and it's hard to build stable economies when there's disruptors such as that. But it does have a kind of a feeling that hemp has been unleashed at a time when it is most needed in our current state of things. And so, but we don't see it being added to many bills or Climate Act initiatives or things, when it's clearly a poster child for sequestering carbon and healthy production of biomass and supply chain for non-toxic materials and such. But to go further into what happens, I think it's awesome for people to see a hemp stock get broken down. And in fact, one thing, there's a lot of logos and branding in the hemp space, and we see a lot of it either at the hemp seed or the flower, which kind of, or the leaf of the hemp plant, which kind of has a little bit of connotation to the high THC cannabis side, as they've been branding with that for such a long time. So as trying to be on that industrial side, and my company Hemp Ventures, there's several other hemp companies or other natural Bast fiber plants companies that have similar branding or logo, but that's our logo is the cross section of the hemp stalk. So you can see it there. It's got the outer fiber and then the inner woody core, the hurd, and then the pith, and that's exactly what you'll see on a true fiber or a true dual purpose that has a pith through a hollow center core through the hemp stalk. It means it's going to be waving around a lot more out in the field and such, rather than being genetically selected to have a really solid, hard filled core, which is typically for the floral plants. And you'll see those guys, they're totally filled in. Typically, this one's got a little bit, but it's much more in the center here. It's totally filled, and that's because this plant has been bred over generations and generations to hold pounds of flower. While this one is in a field of much higher density, and it's growing at a much higher rate vertically, so it has limited lateral branching, and actually leaves down the bottom that aren't getting sunlight anymore will fall off during the growth of the plant. And then at harvest time, what we're doing this year is actually the green stalk, that is the plant. And how it gets this color is that we cut it, a little bit above the butt of the stalk. The very, very bottom of the stalk has a little bit different makeup as it's supporting this long, slender stalk. So it's a little bit coarser fibers and stuff. So you cut it a little bit higher than that, unless you're going for pure biomass production. But when you get the stalk, it's still green, still has leaves on the top. And sometimes if you're doing dual purpose, you're going to harvest in the field that green leafy material and the seeds. But if you're going for pure fiber and maybe harvesting a little early and it's not too mature and have too much material, it'll still have leaves on the top because the plant's doing photosynthesis to grow itself. But as you cut it, The plant quickly, it's got a lot of sugars in it and stuff that are very interesting to these microbes in the field, as long as you have microbes in the field and you're not in a super, super dry climate. But what happens is these guys come in and start eating away at the glues, the lignins, and they make it easier for the fiber to separate from the hurd. And it also very quickly gives it this golden gray color. And the process is a process of controlled rotting. And the Dutch word for rotting that they use to describe this is called retting. And that's what the process is known around the world as retting the plant. And that's when you leave it in the field to perform this. And there's other ways they're experimenting to do this on a more controlled level, or to do it in places where there's not enough humidity for retting to do enzyme or some other type of treatment to help the plant start to break down before you're processing. But this is really the first step of processing a hemp stalk is that field preparation and the proper cultivation methods to get the right input source material to go into your machines to start making other products. But that is, how it gets to look like this. And these stalks usually 8 to 10 feet, can be taller, can be shorter. And what you got here is something that's like a tree, has an inner woody core, it has wood on the inside. Trees don't have a hollow pith, but it's of the Bast fiber family. And those have, like many other plants, a skin and then a wood-like core. And the unique thing about hemp, again, is its biomass production. One, that it can be grown anywhere, and two, just how fast it grows. But when you do separate a hemp stalk, what you get, just like similar to the bark on a tree and the inner wood, you get this balsal woody material, which is referred to around the world as either shiv, or here in America and many other places as hurd, or some people call it inner woody core. But it's probably the largest, not probably, it is the largest output of the hemp stalk, ranging from like 60 to 80% of your output. And different varieties produce kind of different hurd, and they're different, attributes for different applications. But you're looking, for a lot of the applications like animal bedding and hempcrete building, you're looking for kind of a spongy feeling, lightweight hurd. And the unique thing about hurd is it's got this insanely complex English muffin-like inner structure to it. It's got tons of pockets and capillaries and places to lock up moisture. And if you were going to try to soak something into it, like a hydrated lime water blend for it to absorb into it, it's a really ideal medium for soaking things in and for taking things on, as it's got all these the xylem, the veins that the hurd or the fiber uses to move nutrients through its plant during its life, become all these tiny little capillaries. You can look at under a very fine scanning electronic microscope and see very fine structures, kind of similar to like a natural biochar. But that is the inner part, and that's, like I said, about 60 to 80. And the other part of your plant is going to be that fiber. So this is historically what was used mainly for applications that we know of, like rope and canvases, the Latin root, canvas coming from the same as cannabis. And this is what was traditionally the only thing they were taking out of the field, because a lot of processing was done in the field, and this hurd was hard to collect and difficult to use back in the day. And so it was often burned and spread back into the field, or just left in the field and not really thought of at all. But this here, these little ribbons, they look like, of fiber, are actually tons and tons of individual fibers stuck together in little bundles. And so a lot of the processes that would follow this would be to separate those fibers. Things like scutching, where you'd rub the fiber with, on a piece of wood with another piece of wood, or hackling, where you're taking the fibers after it's pretty clean and you're trying to individualize those fibers by hitting them on nails. And when you do that, you get long, strong fibers, and you get short toe fibers. And those fibers, different, applications or uses would be exercise on them. The long fibers for things like ropes, where you need a longer fiber, and the toe fiber back in the day used for things like oakum, which is a combination of short fibers mixed with like tar or some adhesive or resin to make them bunch, and they'd use that to make things like boats waterproof, or cast containers. And it's kind of an original biocomposite material that was heavily used around the inception of our country and the increase in productivity of hemp here in our early colonies. But yeah, as far as going back to what you can do with this stuff, once it's broken apart into the hurd and the fiber, this is really the first step that kind of unlocks and the applications of the hemp stock. Some people do, and some applications do use a totally, completely put together hemp stock, and they make things out of it. Or there's some companies that compress full hemp stocks into like slugs and will make things out of compressed hemp stocks. But typically, most of the stuff that we're working with is separated material. So you want to separate the fiber from the hurd. Also, if you're doing any chemical treatments to the material, you want them separated first, because this fiber and the hurd are made out of different chemical, different core components that they would break down into. And so you work with them differently if you were to be dissolving them or doing some dissolution process, but also the applications of them. It's almost easier too if you want like a certain amount of it to separate them first and then mix them back together, your desired consistency, if it happens to be a product that utilizes both fiber and hurd. But most products are going to be either fiber or hurd. And so a critical first step, this step called decortication or just material separation. There's ways to do it chemically, and there's ways, people are figuring out ways to do it every day. As it's really, there was no reason to innovate for the last 80 years or so. And now people are looking into it all around the world, especially here in the United States. But to get this fiber to a state where you can use it, you definitely, you need it to not be in ribbons, and a little bit more individualized fiber. You can see this is what kind of hemp fiber looks like once it's all cleaned and pulled apart. And from this step, you can take it and either do some chemical processes to it to keep individualizing those fibers, making those fibers slip apart from each other with things like heat and pH and things to break that lignin down and separate the fibers from each other. You get a finer micron to do things like weave it. So there's really two big classifications of what you can do with fiber. There are other things, but as far as making it into a finished product, to the large subjects of what you can do is either a woven or a non-woven. A woven would be anything like a textile. So taking that fiber and weaving it first into a yarn and then making something out of that yarn. And that's a huge variety of products that could be. And the non-woven is not weaving it. So either doing an air layer, a wet layer, some way to just orient those fibers to amalgamate together to be some sort of material. A very popular one that's well known is insulation. So you can take that fiber in its pretty much raw form and mix it with a small amount of plastic or another natural fiber and put it through a non-woven needle punch line or something like that and make an insulation material. But they can make, house wraps or endless, non-woven hemp fiber applications that can be blended in at small amounts into other materials and such. And then the other thing you can do with it is obviously like one of the highest uses of the hemp fiber right now is they make a non-woven mat, and then they impregnate it with resin and mold it into a shape, and they use that for things like interior car door panels or anything. A lot of stuff that you don't see the front of, or stuff that's the shell, making stuff up there. I know there's like a little moped in Italy that the shell of it's made out of hemp biocomposite material and stuff like that. So it can replace glass fibers and a lot of applications like you wouldn't think of as they make like hot tubs and things that are blown on like that. So that there's endless innovation on that side of things. And then the higher percentage of the hemp stock is that hurd. And hurd, typically this is what like you're looking for. There's a lot of debate around spec, exactly the specification and how that's being measured and what should be the spec for different applications. And that's kind of a brand to brand and consumer to consumer thing. I think that'll continue to develop as the industry matures. But you can take hurd and do a whole lot of things with it. Bigger size like this is kind of more ideal for a bedding or a building material because it's not going to blow away in the wind, and it's easy to work with, and it's not going to step on it. It's pretty soft and such. But as you decrease the size of hurd, you increase its surface area, and as you increase its surface area, it has more surface area to interact with other materials, and that can increase its absorbency. Or it should increase its absorbency. And that is what we can do. So we can grind this stuff up, fine mill it into other applications to make things like a kitty litter or an absorbent product, or put it in a package for absorbing moisture out of something. So that's what you can, again, endless applications. And then here we have actually a fine grind, almost down to a powder, and that can be what they call be a biofiller. And so they blend that, and sometimes they find positive attributes. Sometimes they just are able to mix hemp into something to decrease the amount of plastic or other material being used. But that's kind of what's allowed or been the source material for things like that the PLA blended with hemp hurd to make this material called entwined, which is 3D printing filament, and I can upload this design into my printer and print out cool things like little hemp vases or the best flag that's ever graced this world, or anything that you guys want to see made out of hemp. So it's a cool way to show you can make hemp into anything, but it's really not made. You're not making the plastic out of hemp. You're blending the hemp into plastic. But there are people working on deriving cellulose-based plastics or applications that would be able to be made from the plant parts itself and not just blending the hemp into the plastic. But they also do some things where they use the fiber and blend the fiber in instead, and they do find that they have some positive strength and like attributes that are beneficial to the material, not just being a filler. So that's awesome. But as far as the hurd, you can take it and simply put some glue into it and press it down and make things like particle board, or you could potentially do an initial pulping process and do a real hard press and do like an MDF, a medium density fiberboard. Or I know there's companies that have done research on OSB, oriented strand board, and I think they found some issues. These materials don't lend themselves to every type of application, but some pretty cool things you can make out of it, and definitely, if it doesn't have the highest strength capacity and the highest performance aspects, it can be used, like there is like an art medium or something of that nature. And then continued on the fiber side, one of the most exciting applications that we're seeing continue and develop, and something that's already kind of established in other parts of the world, is building with hemp. And that includes like this hemp insulation material, which there are already manufacturers coming online with production here in the United States. But also there's a very well-known material called hemp lime, or referred to as hempcrete sometimes, where they actually mix this hemp hurd, this very absorbent natural woody material, with hydrated limestone and water, and it actually basically petrifies this hurd, kind of turns into a big fluffy rock. And a big fluffy rock probably is like the best building material you could think of. And they use it as the installation system, and it's pest resistant, mold resistant, fire retardant, and has a host of other benefits. And we'll have some hemp building experts here on the podcast as well, describing these benefits in this industry in greater detail. But as you can see, Endless is kind of not very similar to the cannabinoid market, even the 2018 to 2020 CBD market, up and down, with being able to not find markets for all the material being produced. We really see this as a far-fetched possibility in the fiber space, just because it seems to be quite the opposite, that there's very limited production, a lack of knowledge in the space, and a huge demand for these resources, things that could easily supplement cotton and petro-based materials, things that have insatiable demands for them. And some people have addressed the hemp market, and tried to see how large it could be. Hard to speculate those things, as it doesn't operate in a vacuum, but that is, in the trillions of dollars, the potential marketable or market size that these addressable market, these materials could go after. And then on top of that, people are doing stuff, innovating right now. So it's creating markets that we don't even speculate as possibilities, creating new products and materials. One of those that I'm super excited about is, like I said, that hurd material lends itself to lots of applications. It's incredibly light. And there's a group out of New York that has a patented process for a mycelium. I'm sure there's other ways to make the mycelium that does, similar activities, but there's a company called Ecovative that has a mycelium that they actually inoculate into hurd, and then they let it grow for a few days and then put it into a mold, which is molded in the shape of some plant starters. And you can basically, with 100% bio-based, just mycelium, the root structure of mushrooms and hurd, mold yourself anything you make the shape of them, as long as it don't have huge intricacies and overarching stuff. But it's pretty incredible. And then this here could be thrown right into a compost and would deteriorate back into soil and such. So lots of product innovations. This is really, like, in my opinion, the most American endeavor ever. They've been saving this one for a generation of absolutely terrible children to come back with the glorious reintroduction to nature and industry and producing your own materials and products and having pride in what we make and do. And so hopefully that's what we do, and we don't just mess this one up, but it's, I believe, the greatest opportunity in our lifetime. And the reason why fiber, unlike grain and cannabinoid production, hasn't just blown up and hasn't just taken off, and there are already established supply chains and known equipment, is because fiber is much different as far as its complementary industries. There's nothing in the United States quite like our biggest fiber is cotton here, obviously. And we have a lot of processing, and we're experts around the world in that, but we don't have hemp. So we haven't innovated on hemp fiber or many other Bast fibers. There have been small projects on flax and small projects on canaf, but nothing at a commercial scale. So while hemp seeds are very similar to flax or sunflower processing, and they can buy equipment that's on the market, and there's experts that service it and have built it and can design it to be modified slightly for a different size seed and such. And then the cannabinoids, lavender extraction or other types of extraction use similar principles. And then on top of that, we had a very large medical and recreational extraction knowledge on the cannabis plant already, especially in places like Colorado, which is why they got a head start in the CBD space. But that is, fiber's got nothing like that. So a lot of this stuff is being made from scratch, or it's being pulled up from patents from the late 1900s. And so there's been a huge break in innovation, and it seems, like that's the area to focus. And that's what, my pursuit has been, to try to help build those supply chains, initially looking at European processing systems, but, my company now looking and working on developing higher productivity, higher efficiency, lower cost, systems built in the United States of America, to process American hemp. And hopefully that will help keep bringing down the hurdles and the risks and the unknowns when people can see systems and know how to service them, and technology that works and is consistent. And but yeah, that's the big difference between the hemp plants. I think it's important that people realize that no one's growing fiber clothing that also produces high THC flower material. And
yeah, that's like a joke that people love saying when you say, oh yeah, I make hemp clothing in the United States. Like, oh, can I smoke it? It's like, no, it's not funny either. You're not the first person to say that joke. Funny enough, I think that's one of like my more successful TikTok videos, is making fun of that joke. But yeah, so that was a lot. Like, there's very clearly a lot going on here. As you said, it's one of the biggest opportunities, if not the biggest opportunity. Like, it's not every day that a new industry pops up. This is something that was already, the proof of concept was there. It's been used for tens of thousands of years. And then there's just in the grand scheme of things, it's only been 80 years. So like, historically, it hasn't been, prohibited for that long. But it was prohibited in a time of massive technological revolution. So it's kind of like outsized how far behind we are, really. But yeah, like with any new industry, there is that chicken or the egg situation where the farmers aren't going to grow it on the industrial side until they know that there's a market that's going to purchase the products that they're growing. The people aren't going to invest like what you're doing on the infrastructure side of processing it unless the farmers are growing it. Like major corporations, like you touched on car panels. Like there's major automobile manufacturers that are using this in cars right now, but they're not talking about it because it's a performance thing. They're using it because it works better. It's not a marketing gimmick that they're using hemp because they're trying to appeal to like the hempsters out in the world. They're using it because of its, sound dampening and the weight and the strength and all these things. There's legitimate benefits, but I mean, it's obviously a strategic thing. They're not talking about it. There's not enough supply to go around. If other manufacturers were to start wanting to use it as well, that's just going to mess up the whole supply chain in terms of what they're getting. So yeah, definitely. I would agree. There's not, I don't think there's a bigger opportunity in terms of industry growing in the United States than industrial hemp. And, you know, you're on the processing side. I'm on the textile side. There's on the textile side, we see people, you know, trying to just plug it into the cotton spinning supply chain that we have now. And that's not really the best way to utilize hemp fiber. So there's a lot there. There's so many different products that we can make from this. And like I said, it's not like a gimmicky thing. Some of it, you can make some gimmicky things out of it that are cool and like appeal to hempsters, but on the, you know, the real addressable market is very legitimate benefits from these products, whether it be building materials, food, non-wovens for industrial applications, absorption, manufacturing, cars and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm with you there in terms of just the excitement around all the different products. And, you know, we got to see if people are just listening to this, you know, the videos is going to be available on Spotify as well. But, you know, you just did a little mini decortication example there, like hand decortication. So you're throwing it back to how they did a long time ago. And out of all those things you talked about, like our goal is to get specialists of all those different aspects to really go into detail about kind of the state of the market, what's necessary to propel forward and to actually get this to be a thing where it's ubiquitous across just everyone's daily life. Like you don't even need to know that something's made out of hemp, but your kitty litter, you know, it's going to be better that it's made out of hemp. Styrofoam, it drives me crazy when I order anything online and it comes with like all this styrofoam. It's petroleum fluff essentially that we could replace with hemp, hurd, and mycelium. And, you know, mushrooms and cannabis go very well together as nature has intended. So it's like nature's styrofoam right there. Throw it in your compost pile. It's much more rewarding than, you know, trying to break down styrofoam and put it in the trash and know that it's not going anywhere forever. Like it seems, yeah, you know, it seems irresponsible that we are perpetuating these industries. So yeah, definitely shining a light on Ecovative and everything they're doing. Cool. So we've talked a lot about all the different things that you can make out of hemp. So let's quickly, like, what are your favorite hemp facts? Like historical things or current events, or what are your top, you know, facts about hemp that if someone were to ask you, like, what's so cool about hemp, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say, you know, it's one of the biggest flips in historical laws regarding something. You know, it went from being required by law to grow it to being required by law not to grow it, which it just makes this a little suspect. But more so than that is I come from a family of merchant mariners, and boats are anything that floats is pretty dang cool. And used to, you know, run the world of trade. Much of the world of trade is still, you know, a maritime industry. But back in the day, they didn't have metallurgy and huge sheet metal boats. They had wooden boats, and they wouldn't float without materials like hemp, and they wouldn't go anywhere without materials like hemp, and they would have naked pirates on them and sailors because they wouldn't have clothing and they wouldn't have books and they wouldn't have anything. And people don't really realize that our country would probably not be here, and they probably wouldn't have been exploring the world. Columbus wouldn't have been sailing, and maybe some people think that's cool, but I'm all about America, and I don't think we'd be here, and this country wouldn't have started without industrial hemp. And kind of seems like we're on a big old downturn, and it kind of seems like hemp's coming back at a great old time to reinvigorate the American spirit and reignite our domestic, you know, pride and production and tenacity, and nothing better to do that than the world's most iconic and notorious natural resource. So that is just drop that on people lightly every day, every chance I get. Take the middle seat on airplanes so I can get two. But yeah, I'm not too serious about it. It's just like the most important thing in all of our lives to make sure this happens. So
yeah. Well, I appreciate your dedication to this, because I mean, you're playing a very important role, and Hemp Ventures is playing an important role, and we'll go into more detail about that on future episodes, exactly what Hemp Ventures is doing. But the infrastructure is obviously very needed. We gotta get more efficient decortication than having Ryan break hemp stalks down by hand to separate the hurd and the fiber.
But that's one way to do it.
Yeah, it's how they used to do it, I guess. Yeah. Cool. One of my, and you talked about it before, I'll just quickly mention a couple things. You mentioned the Sherwin-Williams thing. Those letters are online. Like, I encourage anyone, if you're interested in the history of cannabis, just Google Sherwin-Williams, Harry Anslinger. You can read these messages back and forth from like the director of research at Sherwin-Williams saying, hey man, I don't think this should be like a prohibited substance. This is, a very important aspect that we could use to make paints and things like this. So those historical articles are really cool to read, those letters back and forth. When you talk about like being required to grow it and then banning it. And then we look to World War II and the Philippines getting overtaken by Japan and our hemp supply getting cut off. Hemp for Victory, this massive campaign comes about that it's like, hey guys, I know we just banned this like less than 10 years ago, but we need everyone to grow it again. Like, you guys still remember how to do it, right? They make everyone grow hemp for ropes and different things for the Navy. And then the government tries to like deny that was ever a thing. And Jack Harrow ends up getting his hands on a copy of it and like goes to the government and is like, hey, you guys can't deny this anymore. Like, this is a copy of the propaganda that you guys are putting out to encourage everyone to grow this plant. And then war ends. Philippines are not under Japanese control anymore. We have our supply of hemp, and back to what they wanted to be normal. So that's just a fun little historical tidbit as well. And then the last one, my personal favorite one. There's an ancient civilization in modern day Turkey. So listen to this one. From my understanding, is the oldest hemp artifact that's ever been found archaeologically is like a piece of woven hemp linen that dates back to be like 9,000 years old, found in, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I say it's Çatalhöyük. It's ancient Mesopotamia, modern day Turkey, one of like the earliest civilizations, like a city at the time. And there was a fire in this like clay structure, and it was actually just preserved everything very well in that structure. And it's kind of morbid, but it was like a baby wrapped in hemp cloth. Then they were able to science did their thing, and they were able to say that it was hemp. So, I mean, this is 9,000 years ago, and they were growing it, and they knew how to weave it, and they were using it as textiles. So, it's been around for a long time. It doesn't make too much sense that we tried to ban it. And it didn't work because it's coming back. And obviously, if you've gotten this far in this episode, you know that there's a lot of reasons why it's coming back and why we're passionate about helping it propel or just helping to propel the industry forward. And we hope that this podcast, obviously this is just the beginning, but we're going to get a solid lineup of guests that are industry experts in all different fields and kind of like the trailblazers of the modern hemp industry to share their knowledge and their passion as well about what they're doing specifically. And so there's a lot more to come with these future episodes, and we'll be putting them out probably like twice a month, about that schedule. And any other closing statements that you want to give before we wrap this up?
I'll just say that we're open to communication. And we got both of our contacts, but if you guys have specific ideas or topics, we're going to kind of do a balance of having hemp industry experts from the fiber, cannabinoid, and grain fields talk about their innovations and products they're bringing to the market, and cut that up every month or two with a little hemp industry news update with what's going on in the space, particularly in the industrial side of the space. And if you guys have any feedback or want to come talk, or have questions about what we're talking about, feel free to reach out. And my email is Ryan, RYAN, @hempventures.org. And then we have a Have You Heard email as well. And then Matt, just want to tell people your contact.
Yeah, so it's at Matt Talks Hemp on pretty much every social channel, and we'll link all this in the description. You can follow us on the Instagram. It's at Have You Heard Podcast on Instagram. Follow us there. You'll get updated whenever we put new episodes out and just random hemp facts that we think are important to share with everyone. And then subscribe to the YouTube channel to get notified when we put a new episode out, or Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you consume your podcasts. And we appreciate you tuning in. And like Ryan said, yeah, we appreciate feedback as well. So any recommendations, concerns, questions, send them our way. We'll catch you next time. Hurd.